Ever feel like life just throws you a curveball? Like everything's going smoothly, and then bam, out of nowhere, you're facing some really tough stuff.
Yeah, those moments when you're grappling with hardship and you just crave something solid to hold on to,
Mhm.
you know? It's something I think we all relate to on some level.
Especially when you're someone who's always seeking knowledge, trying to understand the why behind things. It can be even more frustrating when faced with the unexplainable.
You want answers, right? And sometimes finding those answers requires a deep dive, digging beneath the surface to find meaning and hope in the midst of those difficult times.
Exactly. And that search for hope, for something bigger than ourselves to help us through those tough times, that's what we're tackling today.
We're going to explore a powerful statement of faith from the Bible, Job's declaration, "I know that my Redeemer lives."
It's a declaration that has resonated through centuries, offering solace and strength to people facing all sorts of trials.
And to really unpack the weight and depth of those words, we've assembled a diverse set of resources for our deep dive today.
We've got the Enduring Word Bible commentary, giving us that solid biblical foundation.
Right, and to see how Job's words have echoed through history, we'll be looking at the Wikipedia entry for the well-known hymn inspired by this very verse.
Then, to get some varied theological viewpoints, we've got a collection of commentaries from Bible Hub.
And for a more contemporary perspective, we'll be delving into an article called Redeemed Suffering in Job, which offers a modern take on those ancient themes.
Plus, to get a taste of how people today are grappling with these ideas, we'll be looking at a Reddit discussion that gets pretty raw and real about the struggles and questions raised by the book of Job.
So our mission today is threefold. First, we're going to explore what Job's declaration meant in its original context.
What was he going through? What was he trying to communicate in that moment?
Second, we'll trace how his words have been interpreted and reinterpreted throughout history, especially their connection to that beloved hymn.
And finally, we'll see how Job's statement resonates with contemporary views on suffering and faith.
We want to see how this ancient declaration speaks to the challenges we face today.
So let's dive right in. Let's start by stepping into Job's shoes.
Yeah, imagine being in his position.
I mean, the Enduring Word Bible commentary doesn't sugarcoat it. This guy loses everything, his wealth, his livelihood, his children, and then to add insult to injury, his friends start accusing him.
Right. The people who are supposed to be there for him, offering comfort and support, they turn on him, piling on even more pain with their judgment and accusations.
The commentary really emphasizes how tormented Job felt by their words. Like they just didn't get it.
He even cries out, "God has wronged me and has surrounded me with his net." It's this feeling of being trapped, unfairly targeted, abandoned by God and man.
It's a pretty raw and visceral expression of pain and despair.
And there's a chilling quote from Spurgeon that the commentary includes, something about how harsh words can wound even deeper when someone's already suffering.
Oof, that hits hard.
It does. And then there's D.L. Moody's observation about how, sometimes people are quick to judge someone's faith, but slow to offer real love and support. It's like this human tendency to jump to conclusions instead of showing empathy.
It's something to think about for
Yeah.
sure. And even though Job is bombarded with these accusations, he refuses to accept that his suffering is some divine punishment for some secret sin he's committed.
He's adamant about his own integrity, his righteousness before God.
And that unwavering belief in his own innocence is key to understanding his declaration.
Right, because as Amy Montravati points out in her article, Job's friends were operating within a theological framework where suffering was a direct consequence of sin. So to them, Job's immense suffering could only mean that he had done something terribly wrong to deserve it.
Makes sense in a way, right? If you believe that suffering equals sin, then you've got to find the sin to explain the suffering.
Exactly. And that adds this whole other layer of anguish on top of everything else Job is going through. It's not enough that he's lost everything. Now he's also being judged and condemned by his friends.
And to make matters even worse, the Enduring Word commentary mentions how Job laments the loss of his children, even feeling like they rejected him in some way.
It's like a double loss, you know? Not only are they gone, but he feels like they're judging him from beyond the grave.
Imagine the weight of that grief on top of everything else. It's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And as Montravati points out, Job doesn't just argue with his friends. He takes his case directly to God. He declares, "According to your knowledge, I am indeed not guilty."
He's not just defending himself to humans. He's appealing to the ultimate judge, the one who truly knows his heart.
And that takes a lot of faith to still believe in God's justice even when everything seems to contradict it.
Which brings us to the heart of our deep dive. Job 19.2327. Both the enduring word commentary and Mantravadi's article highlight Job's desire to have his words permanently recorded.
It's like he wants to carve them in stone for all time, for future generations to see.
That's how important this declaration is to him.
It's a testament to the depth of his conviction, even in the face of such immense suffering.
So let's hear those words. Job 19.25-27. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eye shall behold, and not another.
There's so much packed into those few verses.
Let's unpack that key word, Redeemer. The Ellicott's commentary from Bible Hub shed some light on this.
The Hebrew word Goel, which is translated as redeemer, wasn't just some generic rescuer. It had a very specific meaning.
It referred to the next of kin, someone who had a legal and moral obligation to act on behalf of a family member in need.
Like redeeming them from slavery or debt, avenging their murder, or even marrying a widow to ensure the family line continued, as we see in the story of Ruth.
So it wasn't just some random savior, it was someone deeply connected, someone with a familial responsibility to protect and restore.
Exactly. And in his despair, Job is expressing his faith that God will step into that role for him, that God will be his goal, his avenger, his guarantor, his vindicator.
God as the ultimate family member, the one who's always in your corner, fighting for you no matter what.
And Ellicott's commentary emphasizes that Job's declaration isn't just about personal vindication. It's also an affirmation of the reality and eternity of God, that I am statement, that unwavering existence, in contrast to Job's own fleeting and painful existence.
It's like anchoring himself to something solid, something unchanging in the midst of all the chaos and uncertainty.
Precisely. Now, the Benson commentary on Bible Hub brings up another layer of interpretation, focusing on why this Redeemer concept is so often seen as a foreshadowing of Christ.
So how does that connect to the New Testament?
Well, the Benson commentary draws these really interesting parallels between the role of the Goel and the person and work of Jesus.
Like how?
Like how Christ became our kinsman by taking on human nature. He redeemed us from our lost inheritance, from the consequences of sin, through his sacrifice. He avenged death by conquering the devil's power. And he offers the promise of preserving our names, our true identities, in God's eternal kingdom.
It's like taking this Old Testament concept and seeing its fulfillment in the New Testament narrative.
And the commentary also points out that Job's apparent lack of hope for earthly restoration might actually strengthen the argument that he was looking beyond this life to a future resurrection and life with God.
His focus wasn't just on getting his possessions back, it was on something much bigger, something eternal.
And then there's that phrase, he shall stand at last on the earth. The commentaries on Bible Hub, like those by Barnes, JFB, and Gill, offer some different interpretations of what that could mean.
What are some of the main ways it's been understood?
Well, one common interpretation is that it refers to a future event, either the coming of the Messiah, the era of the gospel, or the final resurrection and judgment at the end of time.
So it's seen as a prophecy of sorts.
Exactly. But there's also an alternate translation of the Hebrew word for earth as dust, which suggests a different image. Christ standing over the graves of believers, raising them from the dust.
Oh, wow, that's powerful.
Right. And Jameson Fawcett Brown adds a really interesting thought. They suggest that while Job might not have fully grasped the ultimate meaning of his own words, those words, inspired by the Spirit, actually hold a deeper significance related to the promise in Genesis 3.15 about the defeat of evil.
Like he's given a glimpse of a truth that he can't fully articulate, but it's pointing towards this future redemption that would come centuries later. That's amazing.
It is. And this powerful declaration didn't just stay within the pages of the Bible. It went on to inspire a really well-known and beloved hymn.
I know that my Redeemer lives, right?
That's the one. And the Wikipedia entry tells us that it was written in 1775 by a former sailor named Samuel Medley.
Who, interestingly enough, went through some serious hardships himself. He was injured in the Royal Navy before becoming a Baptist minister in Liverpool.
So he knew something about suffering and finding hope in the midst of it.
The entry mentions that the hymn was first published in George Whitefield's hymnal and then later by Medley himself. And it's most commonly sung to the tune Duke Street, which is just instantly recognizable, right?
Yeah, that melody is so iconic. And the Wikipedia entry highlights how widely this hymn was used by the 20th century and how it was even adopted by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's clearly a hymn that has resonated with countless people across different traditions and denominations.
It's a testament to its power and its enduring message of hope.
And both the Wikipedia entry and information from the Georgia Baptist Mission Board confirm that the hymn is directly inspired by Job 19.25.
It takes that personal declaration of faith in a living Redeemer and turns it into this communal song of victory over death.
It's really fascinating how it's evolved over time, becoming primarily associated with Easter and the resurrection of Jesus.
So we've gone from Job's personal plea for vindication to this communal celebration of resurrection hope. That's a pretty amazing journey.
It is. And it shows how these ancient themes can be reinterpreted and applied in new and meaningful ways throughout history.
Now let's shift gears a bit and look at some more modern reactions to the book of Job.
Right. Let's see how this ancient text lands with people today.
We've got this Reddit discussion where a user expresses some real frustration with the whole story, particularly with how God seems to treat Job.
Yeah, this person is really wrestling with that initial interaction between God and Satan, the whole bet scenario, and how God allows so much suffering to befall a righteous man like Job.
The user asks this very pointed question: how is this a good thing? It's a raw expression of that age-old problem of evil. Why do bad things happen to good people?
It's a question that has haunted humanity for millennia.
And this Reddit user articulates that very visceral reaction to the seeming injustice of it all.
And the thread offers a whole spectrum of responses. Some people try to defend God's actions, while others are more critical, even finding God's behavior monstrous.
It's fascinating to see how people grapple with these difficult questions.
Like one user, Charles Combe, suggests that the Book of Job serves to establish this very problem of evil, the understanding that suffering isn't always a direct result of personal wrongdoing.
It forces us to move beyond simple cause and effect, to acknowledge the complexity of life and the reality that sometimes bad things happen to good people.
Right. And recognizing that things aren't always fair is crucial for developing empathy and compassion.
That's a really interesting point.
Another perspective that comes up is that the whole bet scenario might be more of a literary device than a literal historical account. It's a way to frame a theological discussion about suffering and faith.
So it's not necessarily meant to be taken as a literal event.
Right, and that can make it easier to digest for a modern audience who might find that initial setup a bit disturbing.
Definitely. And then there are users who bring up the idea that suffering is just an inherent part of the human experience, that it's not always about individual reward or punishment.
It's just part of life, part of what it means to be human.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, there are those who find God's actions in the initial chapters deadly troubling.
It highlights the diverse ways that people engage with this ancient text, the range of interpretations and reactions it evokes.
From those seeking theological meaning to those who find it ethically problematic.
Exactly. Some users connect Job's suffering to the suffering of Christ, seeing it as a foreshadowing of ultimate vindication and redemption.
Like a prefiguring of the ultimate sacrifice.
Others emphasize the importance of trusting in God's wisdom, even when we don't understand his ways.
That's surrender to a higher power, even in the face of the unknown.
And then there's the discussion about the word Satan, how it might simply mean adversary or accuser in a more general sense, rather than the embodiment of evil.
So it's not necessarily this cosmic battle between good and evil, but more of a test or a challenge.
Right. And that can shift the whole dynamic of the story.
It's really interesting to see how one word can change the entire interpretation.
Absolutely. And then there's the view that the book is ultimately about praising God, regardless of our circumstances.
That unwavering devotion in the face of adversity.
And others see it as a metaphor for maintaining faith and integrity when life throws its worst at you.
It's about standing firm in your beliefs, even when everything seems to be falling apart.
This Reddit discussion is a great example of how these ancient questions about suffering and faith continue to be relevant and debated today.
It shows the enduring power of the book of Job to provoke thought and challenge our assumptions.
To bring this discussion to a close, let's go back to Amy Montravati's article for a moment. She highlights a particular aspect of Job's yearning for a redeemer.
What's that?
She emphasizes that a key part of Job's desire was for God to publicly vindicate his name, to prove that his suffering wasn't a result of some hidden sin.
He wanted his integrity to be recognized, his reputation restored.
And Montravati points out that Job had this unshakable belief in God's power over death, this anticipation of a future redemption, a renewed life beyond the destruction of his physical body.
So even though he's experiencing immense pain and loss, he's still looking ahead to a future hope.
Right, and she draws a connection back to that foundational promise of redemption from sin in Genesis 3.15, suggesting that even though Job didn't have a clear picture of Christ as we do today, he may have had some understanding of this broader promise of future redemption through his faith and sacrifices.
So it's like this seed of hope planted in the Old Testament that finds its fulfillment in the New Testament.
Exactly. And Mantravadi concludes by saying that Job's words offer this profound source of hope and understanding for our own experiences of suffering, because Christ, as our Redeemer, has freed us from the ultimate consequences of sin and death. He's given our struggles a new context, a new purpose.
It's like taking that personal plea for vindication and expanding it to encompass this universal hope of redemption through Christ. It's a really beautiful arc.
And it speaks to the enduring power of Job's declaration, how it continues to resonate and offer comfort to people facing challenges even today.
So let's take a moment to recap the key insights from our deep dive today. We started by exploring Job's intense suffering and his defiant declaration, "I know that my Redeemer lives."
We then delved into the historical and theological interpretations of that statement, focusing on the meaning of Goel and how it connects to the person and work of Jesus Christ.
We looked at how Job's words inspired that beautiful Easter hymn, "I know that my Redeemer lives," and how it's evolved over time to become a song of communal hope and resurrection.
And finally, we considered the diverse and often challenging modern reactions to the Book of Job, seeing how people today are still grappling with those ancient questions about suffering and faith.
It's been a really rich and thought-provoking conversation.
And as we've seen, the Book of Job raises some of the most profound questions about human existence, questions that have been debated for centuries and continue to challenge us today.
It's not a book that offers easy answers, but it forces us to confront the complexities of life and faith head-on.
So for you, our listener, we leave you with this. How might Job's unwavering belief in a future vindication, even in the midst of his bewildering suffering, offer a framework for navigating your own challenges and uncertainties?
What aspects of Job's faith resonate most deeply with you? His insistence on his integrity, his longing for a redeemer, his hope that extended beyond his immediate circumstances.
We encourage you to ponder these questions, perhaps even revisit the Book of Job or the hymn, "I Know That My Redeemer Lives," with a fresh perspective. Remember, the pursuit of deeper understanding often involves exploring multiple viewpoints and wrestling with these complex ideas.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it's given you some valuable insights and food for thought.
And we'd love to hear what sources or topics you'd like us to explore together in a future deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep digging deeper.
Until next time, take care.